I would really like to now focus on just talking about prayer itself and the effects on your soul and why it is so essential for your soul and its future development. And I feel that many of us still don't understand its importance, how essential it is for your future. I still see in many a desire to focus on the physical or what I'd call the metaphysical, the so-called spiritual, without the soul being involved. And it's essential with prayer that the soul is involved. So let's revise what we talked about a little yesterday. Remember, we started last night with this aspect of communication, how God communicates. What's God's language? So God's language is love. And because it's God's language, we could call it the divine love, right? Or God's love. And so what God is teaching you is God is teaching you how to communicate in God's language. So in the end, the language that God would like you to speak in is your love. So this is human love, if you like, how we respond in return to God. All right. Now, the flow of this love is going to determine all other things in your life. It's going to determine how much truth you get into at some point in your future, how much faith you have, how much you exercise your will and in fact are totally conscious of your will, and how much humility you develop. It's going to determine all of the 5 things that we've mentioned before, those 5 qualities, all those feelings. It's going to open up every one of those feelings. In addition, it's going to control the rest of your existence in terms of how much you're able to grow. Because without receiving love, divine love, you cannot grow beyond the 6th dimension of the spirit world. You can never grow beyond that. And there are literally, and there is going to be in the future, billions of people who choose to not grow beyond that point because they refuse to receive love from God. Love from God is the transformational ingredient in your soul's transformation from being one type of creature to another. So we were all created as human souls. We have the potential to become more than that. So God has this beautiful creation with the human soul. If this is our human soul, remember it's the 2 halves combined. This is God's soul, and of course it's infinite in nature, so much larger, but let's draw it so that it fits on the board. And without this love that flows into the human soul, this human soul is not capable of growth beyond a certain point by itself. Right? We are completely dependent on God's love for our future continued everlasting growth. And I just died, I think. Did I?
No, you're there. Resurrected.
That's good.
I can let it go fast.
Okay. So this flow of love is the essential thing to understand. This is also the essential thing to aim for in your future. To have a continuous flow of love between yourself and God. And eventually to have a continuous flow of love between yourself and the other half of yourself, right? Your soulmate. They are the 2 biggest and most beneficial things that you could ever develop in your own life. Most of us don't believe that. That's why you're not developing those 2 things. If you truly believed it, you would be developing those things above every other thing that you do. You would be spending more time doing that than you would spending time doing everything else. Remember, was it last year, I gave a talk about what is your treasure. Yeah? And remember I talked about having this analysis of the way in which you spend your time. Because it's a very good indicator of how important you find things. Right? The majority of us spend very little time developing our relationship with God, and many of us spend even less time developing our relationship with our other half of our soul. We spend a lot of time doing and very little time in development. So you know all these self-development courses that you can do on? Well, God's going to put you through the biggest self-development course of your life. But it needs to be engaged with your will. Your will has to engage it. God will not force you through this course. Every step of the way, God is not going to make you do anything. It has to be driven by your will. Right? So prayer, this communication between yourself and God, is completely driven by your will. If it's not happening, if there's not a flow of love coming out of you towards God, or not a flow of love coming out of God towards you, and it's certainly coming out of God, but it's not entering you, then it's to do with how you are exercising your will. We must understand that. We've got to stop blaming God for us not receiving God's love and see it as a direct result of how we are exercising our own will. And you need to stop blaming your soulmate for not feeling your soulmate's love. Right? For you not feeling your soulmate's love. You must see that it's an exercise of your will. Does everyone get that? You see, the more you exercise your will in the direction of love, the more you will receive these kind of loves, the more you will develop. Now, if this is the communication method, then of course it's imperative that we begin to develop this communication method in our day-to-day life. So the communication, the flow of love between ourselves and God, is imperative that we spend time having this flow occur. With regard to the love that we express with our friends and neighbours and in particular with our other half of our soul, it's imperative that we develop the flow of love. Stop being afraid of love and start developing it. Allow yourself to experience it. It will soften you immensely. It's the cause of all other development that you'll ever achieve. And remember, God's love transforms not only, yourself in your current state into something that's pure, but will continue to transform you in an infinite manner if you continue to desire it. So it's not something, because our love is finite, we can't, like if I'm expressing love to Mary and it's only my love that I'm expressing to Mary, there's a finite limit to how much love I can give because I'm a finite individual, right? And there's a finite limit to how much Mary can currently receive because she's currently a finite individual. But if we both grow in harmony with God's love expands our souls and therefore makes it so that we can also share a more infinite style of love with each other that's continuously growing. So there'd be no such thing between a soulmate couple, there'd be no such thing as a stagnant relationship if we did this. There'd be no such thing as falling out of love after you've gotten in love. Because the love would continue to grow and continue to grow exponentially as we receive divine love. Divine love is causing our soul to stretch and expand into a new creature. And we must understand this. Even from an intellectual perspective, we must start to gain some kind of faith about that process if we're ever going to engage our will to do it. But let's get back to this. So here we go. This communication is the most important thing you can learn about prayer. This flow of love. Jenny, would you like to ask a question about it? Okay. It's not a fear-based question, is it then? She's considering. Have the mic and let me see whether it's a fear-based question.
I think it's constructive.
Go, fire away.
Can you lose divine love by your denial?
Yeah, see, that's a fear-based question. If God is infinite, right, and God's soul is infinite, and God's love is infinite, and also ever-present, then logically, what's the answer to your questions?
No.
Okay, so that's it. That's the answer. Can you see how many times you can determine the answer of your own questions just by using a bit of logic? And you've got to ask yourself, why is it that you want another person to confirm your answer? Do you see what I'm saying? And we are addicted to having other people confirm our answers that we get directly from God most of the time. And that's all about an addiction to approval. The reason why many of us cannot hear God is because we receive a bit of God's love, we get the truth on a certain subject, the truth confronts the concepts of the people around us, and so we want their approval. And instead of allowing ourselves to feel that emotion, instead of allowing ourselves to be humble to that emotion, we ask question and another question and another question and another question when we know the answers to many of the questions we're asking already. And we just don't trust ourselves because we feel too afraid to trust ourselves. We're worried that we're going to be the only person standing up for the truth that we already believe in. And so what we do is we want some support from somebody else, some confirmation. Now, I haven't had the luxury of any confirmation from another person with anything that I've learnt my entire life in 2,000 years. That's why I'm quite certain about what I've learnt. Because when you have a relationship with God, you get confirmation through that relationship. And if you learn to have faith in it and trust it, that's all you need. It's lovely when you meet up with other people who have the same relationship with God and who have the same experience that you've had in terms of the answers to the questions, but you don't need that to happen. The reason why many of you are not sharing what you've learnt thus far is because you're afraid and you want confirmation from people that are never going to confirm the truth of what your experience is. They're not going to confirm it because they haven't had the experience. They're only ever going to confirm it if they went and chose to go through the experience. Right? We're so afraid. We're so afraid to be the only one. You look at all the primary discoveries on this planet that have ever occurred, there was usually an initial person who was the only one who believed it. The same applies to the medical profession, the same applies to the scientific professions, the same applies to all of the professions you can think of. There was usually a first person. And do you think they had it easy, the first person? No. Right. Okay, so let's get back to the communication. So there's prayer. What does it do to your soul? What does the prayer itself do to your soul? Not the reception of God's love, but prayer. What does it do to your soul? Right? Yeah, if we just hands and then we'll have a mic, because I do want to get this answer. If we go to Felix and then...
Prayer opens my soul.
So it opens your soul up to?
God's love, which he wants to give me.
Yep, very good. So here's our soul, the container of a soul, and it creates an opening that was previously closed. That's the case. Previously it was closed because God didn't create you with an automatic opening to divine love. Does that make sense to you? He gave you free will, and you have to exercise that will in order to have this relationship with God. God's not forcing you into a relationship. You see, if God created your soul with an automatic opening to divine love, then he would be forcing you into a relationship with him. And God's love is so pure that he will never force you to do anything, including force you to receive his love. So God created your soul closed to God's love. Right? That's the opposite to what most people believe. Right? Your soul is created closed to God's love for one primary reason, because he gave you the gift of free will, and you can open your own soul, and so the opening of your own soul is under your control. So God created it closed, but with the potential of you opening it to reception of God's love. And your decision to make the opening not only allows God's love to flow in, but also creates an expression of love from your soul towards God. Now, this causes God great deal of joy. I don't know if you felt it yesterday, but when I stated how much joy God gets from you feeling love for God, could you feel God in that moment? Many of you had the experience of feeling God in that moment confirm what I said to you. This feeling that comes from God, you are my child, I love you, and I love to get your love in return. Right? Because it's the one thing that God can't take from you. Mind you, God's not going to take anything from you, but God has decided to not take this love from you, but rather wait until you're ready and willing to give it. How's that breeze coming from those?